Hi, I'm Bruce Williams. This is Chamber Chats, and it's Chamber Chats because I'm the CEO of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. I would like to begin, as always, by acknowledging that I live and work on the ancestral territories of the Lekwungen-speaking Coast Salish nations, the Songhees and the Esquimalt. And we are pleased and proud to work and live alongside them every day. Chamber Chats is brought to you by Island Savings, a division of First West Credit Union, and Seaspan Victoria Shipyards. And speaking of Seaspan, we're going to talk about Seaspan today. You know, the fact that they're present in this production that we do all the time shows the level of community support that they provide. And the guy who runs the show at the shipyards is Joe O'Rourke. He's the VP and GM at Seaspan Victoria Shipyards. Joe, how are you today?
I am doing great. How are you, Bruce?
I'm great, thank you. So I kind of everybody knows the shipyards are there
hmm
and they kind of think they know what you do. But I
hmm
think we're going to have this conversation to explain to people exactly what it
hmm
is that happens. You're one of those kind of quiet giants in our
hmm
economy around here.
hmm
C-SPAN is also a chamber champion with our chamber, and we're very grateful for that. So, in the simplest of questions, Joe, what's a shipyard? What's the nature
What's
of
a
the.
shipyard?
Yeah, what do you guys do?
It actually is a good question, and the fact is, a shipyard can encompass all sorts of things. A shipyard can be as little as a company with 20 people who has pier next to the water, and all they do is have small vessels pull up, and they do work on the top side. And then they grow up to having small docks, floating docks, which again are big boxes where you pump water in, it rises up, you take the water out. Excuse me, you put the water in, it drops, you pump the water out, it lifts everything up, and then graving docks, which we actually have here, which is basically a very large ditch with basically is a caisson, they call it, which is a mobile steel structure that you move in and out. And the basically is you basically pump, you take the caisson out, the ship drives in, you put the caisson back, pump all the water out, the ship is high and dry. And so graving docks usually are the largest, and of course usually have the largest amount of capacity because it's sitting on basically concrete. Um, our yard itself is, again, within the public facility of a Skymalt graving dock. It is a public yard. There are other users. However, we do have a tendency with our large contract to be the major player in here and use and the greatest generator of revenue, jobs, and associated services with it. So for a shipyard is, again, so it can do all things. It basically has to be next to the water.
Mhm.
It has to have some type of trained workforce, considered trade workforce that execute from everything from basically what we call a shave and a haircut, which is removing paint, putting new paint on, propulsion systems, and such. We, as a shipyard, having major contracts with the Canadian Navy, we are a prime contractor on the 5 frigates here. We have those till end of life, which we're now hearing could push into the early 2040s. That produces an average of 300 to 400 jobs per year just by that contract alone. Under Babcock Canada, we are the production provider on the submarine programs. Canada operates 4 submarines, of which 3 are located on this side. And we do the heavy maintenance and the upgrades on those packages, again, employing hundreds of people. And then also, because we have a big graving dock, we do big ships and we do big projects. Biggest examples of it, we just completed a 2 package basically upgrade system for the New Zealand Navy. The Takaha and the Tamana were here. Takaha has now safely moved, gone back home to New Zealand. Tamana is in what we call post-production over at FMF, where they basically are commissioning all the system and is due to go back toward the end of the year. That was a 3-year project, and again, hundreds of jobs involved with that. We're in the middle of doing the first LNG dual fuel upgrade for a company called Tote Maritime, located in the Pacific Northwest. I'll bet is all over the U.S. 2 different ships, giving the ability to run either LNG or other fuels. We'll be doing the last. It's taken over 5 years, 4 major evolutions. We'll be finishing off the first ship, Midnight Sun, in the December through February period this year, and then the second ship, the North Star, will be finishing up in the 22-23. Again, hundreds. That one is 400 people basically going to town over a 2-month period. So we pick up the large stuff in terms of us ship repair and conversion. We actually we just were awarded one small job for BC Ferries because we do play in that area. We've done a couple barges, but our sweet spot is the larger, the more complex, the ones that require a higher higher level of service and a higher level of complexity that few other shipyards have. And then last, because we are the big ditch, cruise ships. There's only 3 shipyards in North America that execute cruise ships on a regular basis. One is in the Bahamas, which does almost nothing but cruise ships. One is across the border in Portland, Oregon. Vigor Industrial also does it. And then we're the third. So usually in most years, we see 2 to 3 cruise ships, and that's somewhere between 6 and 14 days of 24/7, 400 to 500 people, thousands of people, whether they're crew or outside specialists coming in. We deliver on time, and you have to be good to be in that kind of level of work, because the first time you're not good, the customer goes away. So
Yeah.
that kind of encompasses our business in about 3 minutes.
Now, you made reference to something called FMF, which is Fleet
Mhm.
Maintenance Facility. That may
Yes,
come
sir.
up again. I want to stick with the cruise ships, though, because to me, it's a spectacular sight to be
hmm
driving down Admiral's Road and
hmm
suddenly behind a row of houses is a cruise ship.
hmm
It's boom, it's right there. It's larger
hmm
than life.
Yep.
What's the future of that work on cruise ships, do you think? Because, of course, we're hearing now about the suspension of service to this country. We're not really
hmm
entirely sure if that's going to come back. But
Yep.
what does that look like from your perspective?
I tell you what, I think the perspective of us is still good. Now, you are entirely correct. Actually, it turned out we lost 2 years of cruise ships last year and this year, because once COVID hit, basically they were off the table. In fact, it put an impact across all our commercial, just the difficulty of cross-border traffic, international people coming in and such. Is 2022, they do plan to lengthen the dock, so they're taking one section out of service. So again, they'll cut it down to 700 feet, which will allow us to do other work. But 2022, we do already have 3 cruise ships scheduled for 23. I think we're up to 2 for 24 and booking for the years out. Now, we still have to secure space because there's other users for it, and there's a booking system where it's sometimes hard to get into it. But the impact to us is these ships will still sail from somewhere either below us, whether they stop, and of course, we certainly want them to stop in Victoria and Vancouver because of the positive effect they have to the economy, but they still will sail between here and Alaska. The Alaska trade is not going away. And then realize the reason why we capture them is because we do it well. We deliver on time, and we hit them when they first come up in the March, April time period, or we hit them in the September, October period when they're departing. And then realize in any of those other 7 months, it's like looking at Ogden's Point. Ogden's Point's full for 4 to 5 months a year, and then you do not see a cruise ship except very rarely for the 7, 8 months otherwise, because of the Alaska trip. So it is still strong for us, but boy, we certainly hope that they will figure this out, because realize when cruise ships come in, both for the community itself, the thousands of people that pour into downtown, well, the same thing for us is a crew is still coming in. They may send it's 2,000 crew members. They may send 1,000 home, but that's 1,000 people staying on the ship and then going out at night and generating dollars. And then there is a large component of what we call specialists. Realizing the cruise business, we are the ones that do the painting, the propulsion, the steel work and such, but they bring specialists in for audio visual, for teak decking, for cabin outfitting. There are a lot of things that we don't do, but again, it is not uncommon that they send in more than 1,000 people, and those people are out there at night putting money into the community. So yes, and then the whole thing is, it's like bringing it in, and all of a sudden there's that 22-story office building located next to you that wasn't there the day before, and that's just exciting in itself.
Yeah. I want to talk next about the exact size because I don't think people realize how big the shipyard is. I want to talk
Mhm.
about that next. Our guest on Chamber Chats is Joe O'Rourke. He's the Vice President and General Manager of Seaspan Victoria Shipyards. So, Joe, this is an enormous footprint. First of all, how
Mhm.
big is this facility?
This facility is approximately about 26 acres and such, and with the intent of expanding that to create more pier space and more land space to of course, generate more business. There is movement and discussions, again, being a Canadian owned property, being a significant asset for the service of the Canadian Navy. It's always going to be here, but there's more opportunity for both ourselves and other users in the facility. So about 26 acres. Again, the dry dock is 1,000 feet long. They plan to extend it to 1,200 feet long, which will allow the frigates. Now realize a frigate requires about 20 weeks in the dock. And with a shorter section, it really doesn't leave enough viable space. They are extending one section that allows the frigates to go in. We'll still leave 700 feet for other work, which will, again, for us and other users, allow more opportunities to go out and seek more work. And then realize in ship repair is it's job creation. We sell labor, we sell people. It's our group of professionals that both drive our revenue and are the reasons why these customers come to us.
And within that 26 acres currently, how many, you've mentioned a couple of hundred here, a couple of hundred there
Mhm.
doing these various projects. How many
Mhm.
people in total work at the shipyard?
But look at is we have ranged from low as look at the worst of COVID, we dropped down to about 700 people. 2 months before we had to hit a new high of accounting salary and our trade men and women. We were over 1,500. If you put an average in, it would be right around 1,000 persons per day. And of course, that doesn't count the other people, subcontractors, and other support mechanisms that get drawn into it in the execution of our work.
So that's basically 1,000 jobs, 1,000 households, 1,000 people. You're a huge driver in this economy.
Look at and if I want to scare someone in terms of wants to run a shipyard, you look at them and say, "Are you prepared to take care of and lead and protect the viability of 1,000 families?" And you see if they gulp at that, because
Yeah.
it is again. And when you said is, the thing is, I get to be the face of the shipyard. I get to be the leader among leaders. But again, it always takes a team to get to the finish line, and we happen to own a great team with just some tremendous historical roots in the community. The number of people that we have that go back generations. Realize we came out of the seeds of Burrard. There's been significant ship repair going on here for over 100 years, and we have people in the yard in leadership and in trades is that their grandfathers and grandmothers worked in the shipyard. Wonderful picture of the women in World War II working in the shipyard. My executive system has sees a picture of her grandmother sitting in this group of women that were working in World War II in the shipyard when the men were off at war. So again, historical legacy, just again as great team, great performance.
Tell me about the spectrum of these workers too, these 1,000 or more people. What they go from this to this? Like, what do they all do?
Again is a look at we have a calculation. So now again, starting with the trades people again is and again is you call them trades, but really they're professionals. That is one thing that I've seen over 35 years where ship repair in a declining industry had what I call a lot of oddballs and such like this is it now has matured. It's been growing in the last 10 years. And I will name our trade men and women out there. They are professionals. They are not blue collar workers. They are composed of 10 different unions representing 10 different skill sets. The largest being Boilermakers, which is both welders and what we call fitters. They fit the metal and they weld the metal. Laborers, which also include paint. So basically, all the paint removal, paint application, all the labor activities in support of everything else. Pipe fitters is a large group. Machinist is a large group. Um, um, Electricians. When we did all these upgrades on both on the frigates, 5 of those, and then 2 on New Zealand, and then the electrical upgrades on Tote for LNG, we pulled 60 kilometers of cable in the last 8 years, basically on these vessels. So electricians have been a huge group for us. Riggers. Joiners, which are actually carpenters. Boy, if I forget one, they're going to come leaping out at me. And compose until I get up to 10. Machinist thing is I know sheet metal.
There you
I
go.
know the sheet metal. I think I've covered them all. If I've missed one, there's a small one called Move Up, which is clerical. So that takes care of that group. There's still a group of approximately 150 people that basically either are office workers or part of our management or production team. So they're production managers, they're program managers, which of course manage the customer and the markets that they serve in and all the rule compliance that goes with it. We have a very small but strong technical group, an estimating group, which again, you got to bid it before you win it. And then again is the procurement and logistics group that has done great work in terms of adapting to new technology and bringing new tools in. A quality assurance department, which is required in our industry, because again, is if you can't verify that it's right, then it's not right, and that requires a system of documentation and traceability that's inherent in our work. I think I've named them all. I probably missed or two, but it is quite a collection. It is a huge collection of individuals with leadership in various groups that are all committed to work together as a group to deliver a vessel. And again, is that's where we focus on is if the customer is satisfied, if we deliver on time at a higher level of quality, look at the financials will follow. We're luckily to be placed in the business. Having said all that, we're lower than we would like to be right now, just because inability to do cruise work. There is commercial work that is passing on coming to Canada because just the difficulty of getting across the border. The freedom seems to be opening up right now, and it looks like we may be able to attain, but the last year and a half we have been impacted negatively. However, we just still continue to drive forward. So I would love, when I first came in, I would say the core trades was probably in the 400 to 500 range. And I would say now we're closer around the 800, and we're running a little bit below that. So in our highest preference, we would be employing a couple hundred more in normal. But again, the market dictates, and you have to basically be able to flex to the market.
We as a chamber hear from our members usually that the number one challenge they have is finding and keeping workers, and I want to talk about that
Mhm.
next on this chamber chat. Our guest today is Joe O'Rourke. He is the Vice President and General Manager of Seaspan Victoria Shipyards, who are a chamber champion, as I mentioned. So, Joe, workforce has been an issue for everybody in every corner
Mhm.
of this economy,
Mhm.
before COVID, during COVID, and probably
Mhm.
after COVID. So,
Mhm.
where do your workers source their skills? Where are they trained?
Well, basically, is look at it with all the unions. Unions have their own apprentice programs, and realize also we have our apprentice program. So they could be company sponsored or they could be union sponsored, depending on the union. It goes back and forth. Is during look at we had 3 years of high volume. We probably got several hundred people at least partially or completely through an apprentice period and added to it. Realize they go on to work for us, and sometimes they work for competition, but part of being the biggest player in the harbor is the dedication and the requirement to continue to train the workforce. Yeah, and then realize is we're variable in size. There is never one day that there's exactly the same amount of people. The trade balances thing is if one portion of your work disappears, okay, you'll be laying off welders, but now you'll be hiring painters to paint what they welded. So we flex on a daily basis. Workforce retention and acquisition is always a concern. However, I'm not sure is again, is you want to be lucky or good? We try to be both. We do pay a very good wage. We do lead the industry in terms of what we pay our people and what they go out and earn every day. Um, we do have an island mentality, and being on the island, you want to stay on the island. And in terms of what we pay is we can support a middle class family out there in terms of what they we pay and they earn on a daily basis. And there's luxury. You do see a lot of kids finish training. They'll go off in what we call the oil fields for a while
Hmm.
because you can make a massive. But when they want to come back and start raising a family and doing these kinds of things, we seem to have earned the place of being a preferred place to work. And we try to earn that reputation each and every day out there. Not to say the concerns. We do a lot of work and fund Camosun College in terms of just entry programs to come in there on specifically on welding skills and overall shipyard skills. There's a First Nation that's called a SRELT program that Camosun runs to put First Nations into the industry, specifically ship repair. I think in the last 2 years, we've hired their whole graduation class and brought them into the yard. Um, so, yes, and there is a certain amount of nervousness as we come out of COVID. Are they still going to be there? And then there's always the thing is you've heard about Kitimat and this kind of stuff. And there's several large capital projects that are out there that potentially could push us in terms of our ability to retain our people. But like COVID or anything else for other reasons, those have been delayed. So we always carry a certain basis of apprentices. We continue to try to earn the reputation of being the preferred place. If you're going to be in this industry with these type of skills, tools. We want to earn the right that we should be first on your list as the preferred place to be. We work, again, we are not perfect, but we work hard to hear our people, to integrate them together, to work as a team. So yeah, a little nervous, but I will tell you, we went from, in the lowest period in 2016, we were down to 263 trade men and women just because the dock closed due to maintenance and all our work had cycled out at that point in time. And then, uh, 2020, a month before COVID happened, we were over 1,500 people, and now we're sitting at about 800. So it flexes up and down, but so far so good. However, we never take our eye off and then use common tools. Each of the unions gets a 12-month forecast going to the future of what our expectations of work is going to be. So we constantly work with our union and their workforce to let them know when the work comes, when it goes away, when it comes back, and then realize that is one of the advantages of working with unions is they have multiple clients out there that they service and provide workers for. And so it's an advantage to be in the union environment. They will have other alternatives when we can't work them, but we do seek to get them back at the earliest opportunity and put them back to work.
Yeah, I mean, co-ops and apprenticeships, as you say, is where you source your workers. So that stuff is really kind of key to maintaining your workforce. And that,
Absolutely. It just has to be, no matter what size you are, you still have to have a continual stream. And it really requires the big boys like ourselves to step up and feed that. I know the FMF, the Federal Maintenance Facility, has a strong apprentice program. And again, whether they stay with them or move on to such is, look, that's our obligation. And again, with an apprentice program, it's a formal program, which usually gets you to some kind of red seal requirement, such as, and then again, as you work hand in hand with the union to continue to produce them. Some people stick around, stick in ship repair. I would say, is I always called it a disease. Once you catch it, you really don't like to work because look, it is in constant change. It is requires you to be very reactive. What you plan to do today is very rarely what you actually do that day in some form and function. So, and there's an excitement and enjoyment to that. It's different than other places.
yeah, when you look at the impact you have on other sectors and the other tradespeople that come and work with you, I have a bit of shipbuilding past in my family. So my heritage is Northern Irish. And my family were in Belfast, and that was where they built Titanic. So around the turn of the last century, I had relatives who lived less than a mile away from that shipyard. They didn't work in the shipyard though. They worked in the factory next door that made the ropes that they used to tie the ships up, and that still goes on. That still goes on at CFB Esquimalt. But Joe, we have only kind of scratched the surface here. So there's so much more that we need to talk about. Can you come back next week on this podcast?
Absolutely, I can.
Perfect. Joe O'Rourke, he is the Vice President and General Manager of Seaspan Victoria Shipyards. You can, of course, catch these podcasts on Czech television. You can also see it on the Czech News website and the Victoria Chamber website, too. So, Joe, thanks again. We'll see you next week. Thanks to all of you. And thanks again to Seaspan and Island Savings for their support of this broadcast and this podcast. And thanks to our friends at Czech Television for hosting it. I'm Bruce Williams, and we'll see you next week. And I'll be here with Joe.
For more episodes of Chamber Chats, go to czechnews.ca/podcasts.